So, welcome for some of you back. Hopefully you attended the first one or managed to get in. This is, as you can see, a little bit more comfortable here as we've managed to get everybody in so far. We respectfully acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. Welcome. Thanks for coming on what I just found out is the first night of the Stanley Cup playoffs with the Vancouver Canucks battling Nashville Predators. Yeah. So thank you for giving that up. And also, I hope nobody's pooped from the sun run. You still got a very active mind, so that's good. Anyway, welcome. Thanks for coming, and as you know, this is the KitsPlan event, and what you may not be clear on is what is KitsPlan exactly. There seems to be some, not confusion, but a lack of clarity, so I thought I would straighten that out immediately. Here's what we're not. We're not a city-sponsored group. Because the city doesn't do these kinds of things anymore. And in fact, discourages true public engagement and involvement across the board. We're not a development industry sponsored group. We're not a density hating, completely anti-high-rise, no change allowable, keep everything just as it is group either. What KitsPlan is, it's an amalgamation of the many different community groups in the whole of Kitsilano who have been involved in various civic issues over the years. We have pulled these groups together and will attempt to also include as many citizens and residents of Kits as possible in the process of planning our neighborhood. This is intended to include young and old, homeowners, renters, and homeless, all income levels, ethnicities, races, genders, etc. Together we will become educated to the facts and figures of Kitsilano so as to be able to effectively work to co-create a plan for the neighborhood we all call home. Included in this effort, as we learn both about the history and the resources of our community, will be ongoing attempts to understand the older history of Kitsilano from the elders of those who have lived here for centuries. I hope this serves to clarify what KitsPlan is. If you have any further questions about it, what we're, again, going to try to do is have an hour of discussion period so that you can come up to mics, and if you have a point to make, you can make it. If you have questions, you can ask them, either about the previous meeting or this meeting, or anything, really, having to do with Kits. And we want to keep it to 2 to 3 minutes. Because we have a fair number of people here and we want to get as many voices heard because that's the biggest way we learn from each other. So we're going to try to do that. So, enough of that. Hello, class. I say that not as a teacher, but as a fellow student. We are all here to listen to each other and learn. We ask that you treat each other with respect and dignity in all of your interactions. Today we have 2 speakers, both highly respected in their fields, who will continue the discussion started in our last town hall at Kits Neighborhood House. Our first speaker is Dr. David Lay. David Lay is an emeritus professor at UBC, where he taught urban geography since the 1970s. His research and publications have examined housing and neighborhood issues in Canadian cities in a global context. His new book, Housing Bubbles in Gateway Cities, analyzes high housing costs and lack of affordability in Hong Kong, Singapore, Sydney, Vancouver, and London. The book asks 3 questions. Why do house price bubbles occur? What are their consequences? And how has government policy attempted to manage them? David Lay is a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada and was appointed to the Order of Canada in 2022. Dr. David Lay.
I think I was last here in 2017 when we were all enjoying the peak of a housing boom. And we had lots to talk about. And you know what? Plus ça change. So here we are. Please don't shoot. Well, there's an idea doing the rounds that goes something like this. If only home builders could have access to lower density districts in the city, districts like parts of Kitsilano, they could build, and provide affordable housing for the missing middle. Those who were originally identified, I think there may have been some inflation, but originally they were identified as falling within the $30,000 to $80,000 income range. But unfortunately, the idea continues, those neighborhoods have been locked tight by selfish homeowners, protecting existing low densities. Their stubbornness should be undercut through bold public intervention by politicians and planners, upzoning those districts, opening the door to affordable development. Has anyone heard that story?
And we're sick of it.
Well, then you'll be pleased to know that I'm going to unpack and criticize this pervasive idea this evening, which seems to have become, at least in some quarters, common wisdom, despite the absence of persuasive evidence. It is a compelling narrative. Who would not want to believe it? Certainly a population suffering from an extraordinary lack of available, affordable housing would want to believe it. It offers an attractively simple explanation and solution for what many believe is in fact a complex problem with multiple causes and without easy fixes. Now notice that this narrative has got something to offer to both supply and demand side stakeholders. For housing suppliers, it promises new virgin territories for medium density, sometimes high density development in desirable areas where they might never have expected to be allowed to build multiple unit housing. Not surprisingly, this pro-development narrative is attractive, and the real estate industry is on side. Also on side is the frustrated demand of many who are shut out from the current housing market. Younger, even middle-aged, even elderly households who have legitimate expectations that their education, long-term residence, professional job status, all warrant access to affordable rentals or preferably ownership. Their housing situation is often miles away from their aspirations, leading to frustration and what some authors call residential alienation. This union of supply and demand stakeholders has persuaded some governments to abandon 50 years of neighbourhood plans and the public spiritedness that created them. And an earlier model of urban governance has returned, a model that existed in Vancouver from the mid-1930s to the late 1960s, a model that looked to the business sector for its affirmation. This model began in Vancouver with the abolition of the ward system in 1936 and the creation of a free enterprise coalition rather mischievously called the Non-Partisan Association. A history of the NPA in 1980 Okay, we're supposed to get some movement. Do I need to point this at you? Okay, can we move the slide on manually then? There we go. This was the statement made by Paul Tennant, who analysed the history of the NP in 1980, and its well-defined partisan interests. And you can read for yourself: an acceptance of civic rule by business people, a desire for unlimited commercial and physical growth and development in the city, and no desire at all for citizen participation in civic decision-making. Any of that sound familiar? Well, let's see if we've had better luck this time. It's a big button. I'm hitting it hard. Here we go. The grand vision of the 1960s, of this earlier model of urban governance, was the freeway high-rise city. And going through planning materials of the time, one is struck by the admiration for this transportation network that crashed through city blocks and dismembered neighborhoods. But what was noticed at the time was not the destruction, which to my mind is evident as you look at the scale of those planning department images, but it was rather new creation. All three levels of government were at first supporters of this model, the freeway high-rise city. The local media were in raptures, with an editorial writer invoking the modernist machine-like metropolis. I've deliberately concealed the identity of the newspaper here. This is what appeared in an editorial in 1967. Excitingly, the freeway high-rise city, Vancouver was destroying the things of its childhood to be better prepared for full stature in a fast-changing world. A lively imagination can picture a possible future city which has become merely a machine for working. Okay. Obsessed with this grand vision, contrary views were summarily dismissed, especially if they came from neighbourhood interests. So when opposition was ignited in Strathcona in the 1960s by the wholesale destruction of the neighbourhood from urban renewal, plus this freeway, the former freeway alignment, the city's mayor denounced local calls for a public meeting, some of you will remember this, as, quote, a public disgrace and a tempest in a Chinese teapot. Participation? No, thank you. I hope some of you have been seeing some connections with Vancouver politics today, and perhaps recall the phrase that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The past is being repeated in significant ways in Vancouver's urban governance. The role of business interests, a master plan that dismisses neighbourhood as a concept, and neighbourhood residents as stakeholders. A big vision that elevates simplicity over complexity. A non-participatory political process. A view unworried by neighbourhood destruction while extolling new construction.
Let's see if we can get this up with you. As long as it's not up your nose.
Okay. So with this in mind, wake up. How to respond to the view of neighbourhoods as an enemy of housing affordability. Okay, could you go back one, please? I think that's forward. Yeah, okay, that's where I want to be. So I want to look at two key claims of the current bold vision that promotes upzoning. First, that low-density hoarding of land is the cause of home unaffordability. And second, and related, that removing through upzoning this pernicious control will indeed produce affordable housing. So first, low density as the cause of unaffordability. It's asserted that single-family zoning has been blocking the building of more affordable multi-unit dwellings. Could you move it on, please? This is the most complicated slide I think you'll see. Research several years ago by John Rose, a professor at Kwantlen, showed that in Canadian cities, including Vancouver, net completions of new dwellings were greater than net population household growth by close to 20% between 2001 and 2016. So I'll say that again, that if, could we go back one, please? And what he's saying is that if you look at supply and demand, the rate of new supply was actually exceeding new demand by 20% over that 16-year period. And remember that during this period of housing overproduction relative to demand, there was rapid house price inflation, culminating in the 2013 to 2017 boom. Prices for detached houses in Greater Vancouver rose from under $500,000 in 2001 to 1.7 million in 2016. So here we've got an excess of supply, and prices are just going through the roof. In addition, and now the next one, please. Thank you for doing this manually. During this period, the share of more affordable multi-family dwellings also rose steadily, while the share of detached houses fell dramatically from 43% of units in 2001 to 29% of all units in 2016. Note, first of all, that before any upzoning had occurred, there was already a tremendous increase in the role of multiple family units on existing zoned land in Greater Vancouver. So what this study showed is that there was not a supply shortfall relative to household growth, contrary to the argument that supply has somehow been impeded. Indeed, during the run-up to the peak of the price boom in 2017, there was more than sufficient supply for new households, but prices skyrocketed anyway. The results show, secondly, and that's from this slide, that there has been substantial expansion of more affordable, higher density housing without rezoning occurring. Now, these facts contradict the claims of the supply side argument for rezoning. If there's been a supply excess and a rapid expansion of higher density dwellings, prices should not have soared, but they did. We can't blame low density zoning for the creation of unaffordable housing. Now, you might be wondering, what happened to that excess of housing supply? Why don't we have a huge vacancy rate of unsold condos and empty apartments? Why aren't prices lower? One answer is a key reason why affordability has been lost, and that is the role of investors in real estate. 42% of condominiums in the city of Vancouver in 2020 were owned by investors. Could we have the next slide, please? Thank you. And so we get into the issue of real estate as a major investment asset, which has occurred over the last 40 years, fueled by low interest rates and significant returns on property in selected locations. Typically, investors can outcompete buyers whose revenues are restricted to their employment income. The next one, please. By the way, perhaps I should just read that. Could everybody read that? Could you at the back? Okay. Sorry, back one then. This was a statement by Lawrence Fink, the chair and CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest money management firm. And this is something he said at the conference in 2015. The two greatest stores of wealth internationally today is contemporary art, and the other store of wealth today is apartments. Apartments in Manhattan, apartments in Vancouver, in London. So here we are on the global investment map, and investors came speedily here. Now let's move on to the next one. Okay, what this figure shows, I'm sad it's been censored by somebody. There we go, thank you. Is the relationship, it's an astonishing relationship between house prices and incomes. These are real house prices, real incomes from 1986 up to 2020. And this is what we call decoupling. There's been a detachment, a decoupling of incomes in this area from house prices. And this shows just how severe that decoupling has become. Investors provide what I call surplus demand for housing. That is demand in excess of the households who will actually live in dwellings. That surplus demand has been steadily growing. Investors are particularly important in housing booms, where they pile on as prices rise. I've done some research on this in Sydney, Australia. I thought I said something you didn't like. I was waiting for the Rotten Tomatoes.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine, thank you. Okay, am I safe to continue? All right. So Sydney, Australia, there's better public data, surprise, surprise, in Australia than here. And in Australia, we were able to find the share of home mortgages acquired by investors rather than owner-occupiers, and how that has increased substantially since the 1980s. Could you move on, please? Move one slide on. There we go. Okay, basically, this is the boom. Sydney also had a boom between 2013 and 2017. The top two lines on that graph show the increase in prices of the top line is detached houses, and below it, basically condos and other forms of dwellings. And the bottom three lines are, if you like, what we might call the fundamentals, the variables that housing is supposed to respond to. So we've got there variables like the hourly wage, the consumer price index, and you can see they're out of whack. They're out of whack. Something else is driving those prices. It's not the normal fundamentals in the local market. So the next slide, please. All right. Just look here at the dotted line. The dotted line. You see there's two solid lines and one dotted line. And what we're looking at there is from 2002, I think it is, to 2020, again in Sydney. And the dotted line is the share of mortgages that were taken by investors as opposed to owner-occupiers. And you see how they're quite low at first, and then they rise substantially. They are rising during the boom. The investors are getting involved in the market during the boom, and they are inflating the boom. The investor presence in the housing market has expanded with the globalization of real estate. We noticed this locally first in 1986 after Expo. Vancouver became a destination for large amounts of trans-Pacific property investment, leading to the sale of the Expo site to a syndicate of the largest Hong Kong developers. And investment from Asia Pacific picked up again in the 2000s. The next one, please. This is a figure that shows institutional investment in real estate from China into the rest of the world from 2009 to 2016. This does not include individual investors, but just corporations, insurance companies investing in property overseas. This capital had a tremendous effect, and the individual capital as well, on Vancouver's 2013 to 2017 boom. And in fact, it was this capital in particular moving into Sydney, Vancouver, and a few other selected cities around the world that was an important part of the boom we had here, the simultaneous boom in Sydney, in Auckland, and in Hong Kong also. Now, with the present collapse of the Chinese housing markets, and come up to the present now, there is evidence that this capital flow will pick up again. The next slide, please. Oh, let's pass over that one. This is quite an interesting newsletter that I get from a company called Juwai, with its head offices in Hong Kong and Shanghai. It's a global real estate platform for Asian buyers, linking them to markets around the world. And so this is not my statement, this is the statement of this China-based real estate company. And the next one. Okay. This is showing the lead again from Juwai data, so Chinese-based data, the countries where most investment has been going in the last 1, 2, 3, 4 years. In case you can't read that, 2023, number 1, Australia, number 2, the US, the UK. That's Hong Kong money, with people leaving Hong Kong, buying into the UK market. 3 Canada, 4 the US, and 5 Thailand.
Is that in real dollars or is it percentages?
This table?
Yeah.
I don't know. This came from an Ernst & Young study, and this was how the data was presented. That's exactly how it was presented, so I can't give you more information. Now, I want to make the point, and it's an important one, that There are domestic investors too. The story here is not just a story of international investors. During the COVID boom, for example, much of that investment was domestic, that is Canada-based investment, Canadians investing in real estate. Now, I want to just end this first point of the 2 points I'm looking at by reminding us that investors alone have not fueled housing booms. We need also to think of national scale pressures, like in Canada, the withdrawal of senior government from social housing for 25 years. Federal immigration policy, which in my opinion at this point is quite reckless. And Bank of Canada monetary policy. Not least has been the role of a property growth machine within this province. These regional, national, and global effects on affordability far surpass any defensive barricades raised by homeowners to protect neighbourhood zoning. Can I have the next one, please? Yep, that's right, it's blank. Now, the second issue, and I'll be briefer here, is to examine whether upzoning will indeed produce affordable housing. This, of course, is the claim. This is what makes this narrative attractive. The objective here, remember, is to make the market affordable to the missing middle, originally defined as those making $30,000 to $80,000 a year. They are frequently identified as essential workers who are being priced out of the city and even priced out of the region. The intent to create affordable housing for the missing middle is, of course, admirable, but sadly the outcomes will not be, due largely to high and rising land values. And I'd like just a moment or two to consider now the Broadway Plan to densify dozens of blocks along the Broadway corridor. Upzoning will raise the value of land and cause the demolition of existing older rentals, of which there are many. The rule of thumb in this city is that old units are affordable and new units are unaffordable. Because new units, I'm talking about rental units now, incorporate current land costs, labour and materials costs, which older units do not. According to CMHC, this is data for the city of Vancouver, the average rental cost for a one-bedroom unit built before 1990 was approximately $1,700 a month in 2023, last year. For a new one-bedroom unit built between 2020 and 2023, the average monthly rental last year was $2,550, 50% higher. New unit, 50% less affordable than an old unit. So who are we building new units for? Not, I'm afraid, the missing middle. Soon after the Broadway Plan was approved by council, I received an email from a long-time apartment owner of an older building in the Broadway corridor. He'd read an op-ed I wrote highlighting the inflationary effects of upzoning, and he wrote that in the short period since the Broadway Plan had been approved, he'd received 3 different offers to buy his apartment building, with the price rising by 30%. Older buildings and their tenants now face greater risk. A new replacement building will, of course, incorporate today's higher land and construction costs. So the Broadway Plan has made survival of older, more affordable buildings far more precarious. What we can expect is widespread demolition and displacement of tenants living in these affordable buildings. NGOs have been telling us for some time that far more affordable units are being demolished than are being built. What will happen then to the minimum wage worker renting the average bachelor unit, who according to CMHC data is already spending more than 50% of their income on rent? I'm afraid we will be witnessing evictions and government-led gentrification. And with a vacancy rate of about 0.5% for one-bedroom apartments, no amount of city relocation policy can put that right. There's nowhere to go. Sadly, our expectation can only be greater suffering. More people living in camper vans, encampments, and on the street. Now, if you think this is a bit weird, this analysis, I want to tell you that other people agree with this analysis. People as radical as the mayor of Richmond or the mayor of Burnaby. The extraordinary high-density construction in Burnaby in recent years has not produced affordability. This is what Mayor Mike Hurley told Doug Todd recently. The idea that supply will lead to affordability, I'm quoting him, is an absolute fallacy. That's the mayor of Burnaby. In Richmond, Mayor Brodie has pointed out that a vigorous building program with supply exceeding population growth by 50% has not brought affordability. Prices have increased by 60%. Quoting Brodie, it simply does not follow that supply reduces prices. Next slide, please. These conclusions are shared by a growing number of researchers. In the US, a recent review of upzoning observed that, and I'm reading this out for those of you who can't see it, cases as disparate as Chicago and Houston show that deregulation, allowing increased density and a greater mix of housing types, produces higher housing costs, increases displacement, and accelerates gentrification. I'm going to end now with 4 slides from the 1970s in Kitsilano, which shows that Kitsilano residents for a long time have been struggling to preserve affordable housing. In the 1970s, it was in the face of the arrival of high-rise condominiums. This was the office on West 4th Avenue of a group called the West Broadway Citizens Committee. Next one, please. And this is what concerned them, the demolition of affordable housing like this. No, you're killing my punchline here. Back you go. There we are. Okay, just pause there for a moment. This was the 2400 block of West 3rd Avenue, 1974, exactly 50 years ago. Most of the north side has been demolished for a condominium, high-rise, 75 to 100 tenants were evicted. And what I'm saying is, this is what's going to happen again. Next one, please. Well, they were a rather rowdy bunch back then. And this community group decided they were trying to stop the development. And having done other things like writing letters and speaking to MLAs, they occupied the site. Next one and last one. And if you could read the sign that that young radical is holding, who interestingly, I believe, someone here might be able to confirm this, is Mel Behan's father. There he is in his raincoat and his tie, all dressed ready to occupy a building site. The sign says, "Housing for everyone, not just the rich." This is the perennial community ambition. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lay. Our second speaker is Bill McCreery. Bill McCreery is a retired architect well known for innovative housing solutions designed over decades of practice in many West Coast communities. Bill practiced architecture in Vancouver, Calgary, and the Bahamas. After graduating from the University of Manitoba in 1969, including designing several thousand units of developer, social, and special needs housing. Some of this commentary I need to credit to Brian Palmquist, thank you very much. This is from Palmquist's discussion in his, if you haven't read, City Conversations We Need to Have, that is published through City Hall Watch. It's a very good series, raises a lot of issues about land use policies and programs in our city, and it's well worth following. No stranger to housing ideas, Bill has been thinking for some time about alternatives to the "we need high-rise towers to get housing density and affordability" narrative that underpins the Broadway and Vancouver plans. But unlike so many talkers, he has actually designed a solution tailor-made for Vancouver's challenges and lot sizes. It's easy to plunk a high-rise point tower down on a city block, as proposed in the Broadway Plan. It doesn't much matter if the block is in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, or even Seattle, Dallas, or New York. A high-rise block is the cheapest solution to design, but not to build, and can be designed by most any architect to go most anywhere, and generally makes the most profit for its developer. All you must do is ignore a city's existing history and zoning by upzoning a single piece of property or land assembly, not to mention ignoring climate and energy issues, whose problems high-rises exacerbate rather than solve. My challenges, commented Bill, were to get density, but get it for families. This would include how to get a majority of 2- and 3-bedroom homes on a given development site, since the Broadway Plan allows high-rise on an assembly of as few as 3 33-foot wide lots, being close to 100 feet altogether, frontage on a street. I thought that is what I had to address to start. I will now let Bill explain his ideas. Bill McCreery.
I'd like to actually disconnect this from the mic if I could, and I'd like to go down below because I can't see the slides and I'm going to need to do that.
Okay, keep this clip on.
Oh, there we go. All right. Now, can I?
Here, you go downstairs.
Okay, you'll hand it to me.
And I'll hand it to you. Dee, 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 dee. Dee, 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 dee. Here we go.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Larry. Larry's put a lot of time and effort into this, as well as a number of other people organizing this and other events, and he really deserves a lot of credit. I need the clicker too, sorry. Yeah, so I'm going to talk tonight about what I call a 7-minute walk neighborhood center. Oh.
If we need it, do you want me to just stick it here?
Okay, just one minute.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so, sorry, get started here. So we okay, yeah, there it is. Just before we start, I want to apologize. We had some technical glitches with the graphics transferring between platforms. So anyway, we'll make the best of it. There it is. Okay. So the hows and whys of the 7-minute neighborhood center concept. The first one is improved affordability. And you achieve that by setting the zoning, not allowing let's make a deal, spot rezonings anywhere in the city, which is, what that does is create an ever increasing upward spiral that David Lay was referring to, and that's one of the outcomes of this kind of a development model.
What is a 7-minute neighborhood?
I'm getting to that. That's the whole talk. So anyway, you can improve affordability and you can, with set and focus zoning. And so you focus the zoning near the high streets, near parking, or sorry, near transit and local shops. And that also increases the number of people that can use, support the local shops, so you get healthier businesses. And we can also get away from big box stores and actually have jobs for local business people, and in the economy, I think, will be much healthier. In addition to the environment, not getting into a car to drive anywhere just to buy a few groceries. Wood frame construction is also faster to build, 2 to 3 times faster, and it's 24 to 45% cheaper to build. And it's also more sustainable. 2 to 6 story wood frame construction has a 142% lower carbon footprint than concrete towers. It uses local BC lumber, reducing transportation emissions as well. Then you have better livability because you've got lower buildings. People have eyes on the street. You've got safer streets. And a 7-minute walk, you can get from 7 minutes within the drawing that you're going to see in a minute to the local shops and to transit. And yeah, so okay. And I mentioned already the stronger economic viability, both neighborhood businesses and the BC economy, because you're using wood frame construction. We do have a lumber industry in this province. We should be starting to focus on that instead of sending our raw logs to the US and to China and getting them to process them, send them back to us and sell it at a higher price. It's just crazy. And so anyway, it doesn't make any sense from an environmental point of view or an economic point of view or a livability point of view. So how does this apply to your Kitsilano neighborhood? Kits is an unusual neighborhood in the city because there is already a lot of really good density here. So what I'm going to show you in these slides is more of a generic model, and it can be adapted to parts of Kitsilano, and I think it can also be reinforce some of what is already here in Kitsilano, some of the density that's already here. So there's existing shops and residential density. The concept transitions to can be refined depending on, okay, I talked about that. And I also mentioned is determined by a stakeholders roundtable stroke planning meetings, but that's another conversation. But basically, the local people work with the planning department in partnership to do a local area plan. We've had those before, but I think I've got, as I say, it's a different conversation, but I've got some really constructive ideas, I think, about how to improve on local area planning. And one of the fundamental things is you have to give the people in decision-making authority, the local people in the round table. Then this also provides more missing middle housing, which again is not really particularly in evidence so much in Kitsilano, because a lot of the houses have been converted into smaller suites. So they're basically, it's a lot of single people as opposed to more families. And so some of the buildings that if they were put into the existing Kids fabric would help improve the balance, if you like, of the neighborhood populations. And having more families, more kids, and so on. So. Oh, okay. Now, you can't see the graphics on this, but there is a circle where the twos are in the four corners diagonally, and there's the three there. That's basically the limit of the 7-minute walk circle. It's about, I think it's 2,600 feet of walking. And so what you can do is put the density along the high streets, preferably, in most cases, many times, would be at an intersection. So you have transit going from both directions, vertically and as well as horizontally. And the blue blocks are park benches that would be along the street to allow people who are carrying groceries, particularly older people, who would want to stop and rest for a while, or just chat with your neighbors. It's more of a people-friendly kind of thing. So there's also, I've shown some green squares, which are small plazas or piazzas, so people can go for a coffee. You sit outside in good weather and bad weather. You maybe sit inside or maybe under an umbrella, whatever. Vancouver's climate's pretty forgiving in that way, and we don't have those kind of things very much in Vancouver. And I think that can be part of that whole process of neighborhood planning to establish those. So basically the density goes from 2 stories, 2 and 3 story townhouses or zero lot line or whatever. There's all kinds of different building forms, up to 3-story townhouses generally, and then 4-story and 6-story wood frame buildings, which have a combination of unit types that you'll see in a minute. And as you get towards the high streets and the center, the height increases. The whole idea is to seamlessly integrate the new development with the existing single-family areas that surround it. Okay, the hows and whys of the neighborhood center. To be effective, density needs to be set and focused where it will achieve the most. It's better to distribute the same focused new population across all 23 city neighborhoods than it is to concentrate higher concrete tower densities only along SkyTrain transit lines. Doing so gets more people out of their cars sooner across the city than just along the transit lines. And it also creates more balanced, affordable, sustainable, livable, and economically viable communities across the city. And here's an important question that needs answering. Why a 7-minute walk neighborhood center? Why not 15 minutes? Because that's what you always hear talked about, 15-minute neighborhoods. Well, the first one is we don't really need, I'll start over. The 7-minute walking neighborhood focuses denser, closer to shops, services, and transit. And it also accommodates that within that, the circle I've got, and which could also become an oval as it stretches down a high street or in one direction or another, or both directions, depending on the local circumstances. And that will give you even more people in a given neighborhood center. So the 7-minute neighborhood accommodates 100% of the population needs for Vancouver's growth, which is historically 1% per year. I've used both 1% growth and 1.5% growth, which is a 50% increase in my calculations. And that will accommodate growth to 2050 with 23 neighborhood centers, one in each of the 23 neighborhoods. And if you want, and it goes like, I think Colleen and who was it? Scott found that there was about 50 neighborhood centers already in the city, and those can be reinforced. If we do that, we can get another growth that goes up to close to 2,100. And so on. You can keep expanding this along the arterials at intersections primarily until you'll have, we can accommodate 100% of the growth for the whole city until 2300, at least, if not longer. And so this whole idea that you have to build concrete towers to do it is, I think, it's a singular solution, and I think we need to look at other options, and this is one of them. So, there's also a lot of research been done by various people which have found that people will drive instead of walking after 5 minutes, a 5-minute walk. They don't want to walk longer than 5 minutes, so they'll get into their car. So you can't get them out of the car if you have a 15-minute neighborhood. They're going to take the car, and then they're going to go to the big box store, and not to the local business guy or woman. And also these shopping centers. When you design shopping centers, they found that people will carry their groceries from the shopping center to the car up to about 250 feet, and after that they don't like doing it. So psychologically, you'll see if you see parking around a shopping center, it's within 250 feet of where the shops are. And so there's lots of research that reinforces what I'm talking about in terms of 7-minute city. Okay, we also need safe pedestrian gathering places, both large and small and accessible. And this is just a photograph somewhere, I think in Vancouver, I'm not sure where, but there's a firewall in the background. But it's, and there's a fountain, and I think it's a park on the adjacent, but these can be smaller or larger. They don't have to be, the next slide, I guess, please. I'm probably not in control here. And then again, this is from Europe, somewhere, I think it's Italy somewhere, and I took that. And it's pedestrian gathering places of different sizes, shapes, and purposes. So there's a whole range of things we can do. And those kind of spaces, we spend a lot of money going to Europe to experience this. Why the hell can't we do it here? Honestly. And then also in Vancouver, we already have some community spaces. This is Leg and Boot Square, or not Leg and Boot Square, it's Gassy Jack Square in Gastown. And this was an event that we had there, I forget, 10 years ago or something. And it was, the place was just jam-packed full of people, and everybody loved it. I can also remember being there in the 70s. With the police with their batons bashing us on the head. So, anyway, next slide, please. Okay, 7-minute neighborhoods. Okay, these are numbers. You're probably going to get lost in this, but if you are interested, I can try and give you more specific information later, or if you contact me. But with a 7-minute or less walking distance, you can get, in 23 neighborhoods, you can get 170,000 people with 7,400 people per that, which is one of those circles. The circle will create housing for 7,400 people, and going from 2 stories all the way up to 6, but not to 40. And then also maybe a lot of neighborhoods are longer, as I mentioned before, than just an intersection. So at 11,000 people per neighborhood, you get 250,000 at 1%. And that gives you a growth rate to accommodate for 38 years of the growth of the city. Let's see. Oh yeah, 26 years, by the way, from the 23 neighborhoods. That gets you to 2050, because it's 24 right now. And 38 years, I don't know, I can't do the math in my head right now, but it's probably it's about 2270 or something like that. And in addition to this new density, there's a substantial additional zone density in the entire city that amounts, which is basically, there's a whole bunch of projects that have been approved or are in process. And a lot of them aren't being built because the numbers don't work right now. Not because well, there's also a problem with labor supply. We have a minimum, a shortage of skilled construction workers. And that shortage, because of baby boomers retiring, is going to be getting worse for the next 6 years. The baby boomers have been retiring, as we all know, because I see a lot of gray hair in here, for the last 10, 12 years or more. But it peaked about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's still, there's going to be more people retiring. It's going to be even greater shortage of labor. And we're basically, as David has pointed out, we've been building more housing than we need, but it's being bought by the wrong people. And those are the real problems. And the politicians, to the NDP's credit, they've given some credence to that, and they've actually tried to do some things, a bit late, but they also have left a lot of this legislation full of holes. So it's easy to get around it if you want to. And if you want to buy real estate in Vancouver, you can buy it, no matter where you're from today. And okay, that's Prague. These are mostly 6-story buildings. It's kind of a neat street, I liked it. And there's transit in the middle. It's quite a wide street, but anyway, I just wanted to show you, people say 6 stories, that's too high. I mean, it isn't too high. There's all kinds of buildings in Vancouver right now if you drive around. Most of them are new. Some of them are under construction. We just saw some earlier today when we came down through East Vancouver. And they actually fit in quite nicely into the neighborhood. And they work really well. Okay, next slide. Vancouver already has as many 4- and 6-story buildings in the same. And those buildings tend to be in places we like to spend time in, like Yaletown and Gastown. So, again, this is the kind of thing we can build. They're livable, they're friendly, they're safe, and they're also more affordable, which I think is an important thing, as well as being better for the environment. A lot of people, when they're talking about these issues, focus on one, but we've got to focus on all of them, because we have a climate crisis, and nobody really wants to take it very seriously. We have building codes that are become very strict and restrictive, and actually those are extremely expensive. But we're still building buildings that are concrete buildings that are 142% higher carbon footprint than a wood frame building. Does that make any sense for the climate? No, it doesn't. So we have all these building codes to try and make buildings use less energy, and yet we're building buildings that use more energy in the construction, but also in operation costs.
Yeah, but you're talking about the investors. You're not talking about the average person who's living in a home here. So there's a differential. When you say that, nobody cares about climate, considerations, I don't believe that. That's not quite true.
Well, I'm just saying, in the conversations I've had with a lot of people, they tend to be focused on either, some people are interested more in climate change, other people are interested more in livability, other people are interested more in the economics thing, or there's different, people have different focuses. What I'm saying is, I think it's important to consider all those things, not to get to solutions that will really work and benefit our society, because if you fragment your thinking, or you create a bunch of silos to think in, you're only solving part of the problem. And sometimes you end up creating, let's look at towers versus wood frame, lower rise wood frame construction. If you have a tower, yes, you get more density. But what kind of density you get? You get people living in little boxes way up in the sky, as opposed to near the street down below, where they could relate to the street, and they're going to also relate to their neighbors better.
So who are we talking to in the city? Where is the coalition that talks to the housing minister that brings these issues to the floor?
Well, that's what organizations like this community group are hopefully going to be able to do in the future. Because I think
we are shortly going to move to a question and discussion.
Okay,
time.
yeah.
So,
all right, I'm sorry, Larry.
sorry, we should wrap it in.
Okay, yeah, you want to move the next slide? We can get questions later and have a good discussion. Okay, this is the section I kept talking about. I don't know why I kept it so long. I should have had this at the beginning. But this is, the upper section is through going from the single family areas on the periphery to 2-story townhouses and so on, then to 3-story townhouses, and then you get 4-story buildings and to 6-story buildings, and then the 6-story building on the far left with the red in the bottom, that's retail, that's on the high street. So you get 5 stories of residential up above. And I can get into the parking, but I don't have time for that right now. But they're 25 to 45% cheaper, wood frame is, than concrete towers. And I've also shown in this section, you can see it here in the lower one, but you can't see it really properly because the slide's fuzzy, but the lower 2 floors are 2-story units, and the upper 2 floors in this particular section are 2-story units. So those are 3-bedroom family units, and there's 50% of the units in this building are these units. And 50% of that 50%, in other words, 25% of the units are at grade. So those people with their kids and so on have a private garden at the back, and they've also got a less private garden in the front of the unit. And then I've included studio units in the basement of the parking garage. And well, hey, we like basement suites in Vancouver. But if you've ever been to London and other European cities, you get people living down below the main house up above. I mean, I used to go to restaurants there. Anyway, and to do that, you can get 1 car per unit in a 1-story parking garage, which is cheaper to build than going into deeper, more expensive excavation and Anyway, it's suspended slab construction, then a single-story underground parking. And I can do that by having one row, the length of the parking garage, as normal 58-foot width parking structure, and then a small car parking concentrated in another row. So half the cars would have to be small cars. Half the cars today, if you look at a garage, are small cars, and that's going to become more so. So anyway, that's another. I can get into all kinds of depth and discussion about that. Yeah, I've talked about most of this stuff. Shop locally, coffee shops and courtyards off high streets and so on. Yeah. Okay.
Back-to-back separation between the two.
What? At the back?
Yeah.
Well, those are, which section? The lower one?
Yeah, the lower.
Oh, well, I've reduced, yeah, these things require a whole bunch of changes in the zoning bylaws, including the parking dimension for the small car parking, as well as setbacks off the street. I think the front yard setback is something like 15 feet or 16 feet, I can't remember for sure. And again, at the lane, it's the same thing.
So the units are about 15 feet apart.
I think we should probably.
Yeah, okay, we can talk later. Yeah. Okay, so next slide, because I want to get done. Okay, this is, connecting spaces are important, and they need to be comfortable and easily identifiable. That's in Eastern Europe somewhere. This is in Kitsilano, actually, on First Avenue, near Trafalgar. And okay, next slide. Okay, and also the new project on the left is integrated with a heritage house. In this particular project, we restored an old house and built new housing right next to it. And there were 1,200 square foot, 3-bedroom units, beautiful little units with beautiful views over the city and kids. That was on West First Avenue. Okay, all right, you've seen that. There's something here, but, floor plans, yeah. And I just show floor plans, as you can see. The bottom left one is a studio suite underground. The top one is actually a plan of that. It doesn't have walls and so on, I'm just trying to be diagrammatic. And then there's the 1-bedroom units, and then a 3-bedroom townhouse. On the bottom two rectangles are 3-bedroom townhouses showing the outdoor spaces front and back, plus a recessed courtyard for the studio suite. Anyway, so this is a very doable thing. I think it could be a great place to live. It will accommodate all kinds of people, and you don't have to have the 2-story units in it. You can have any range of mix of units you want. But it's also one of the differences with this, is, the other thing is, with this idea, the concept with the family housing, we're having a front door off the street. You have your own address. There's a project that's being done by a developer in East Vancouver right now. What's their lead selling item? They are selling that you have your own front door address. It's big. This is happening right now. And so this is something people do value. And I've done quite a few things like that. This one is downtown, and that's one is in Kitsilano as well.
Bill, could you wrap it? Because
Yep.
we really have to move to the question and answer for the public.
Yeah, okay. And this is, exterior balcony access project, which is the same as what I'm proposing for the other section that you looked at before with the 2-story units and so on. Okay, and Okay, don't need to, okay, just keep one, move ahead. Yeah, okay, these are more front door access projects. And then, again, 2 units on the street in Fairview Slopes. Front doors. Okay, that's it, I think. Thank you.
Can you hear me? No. Hello, testing, yeah. We're going to move now to discussion period. So there's a mic right here. I'm not sure whether it's on. The first person could tap it and see. But if you can line up behind that mic.
Test.
All righty, thank you. You want to?
Oh, well, I want to do this, yeah.
Yeah, we have. Yep. Okay,
Hi. Stand on.
go ahead. You'll have to be behind the mic.
And so I move a little slowly, but I don't think slowly. So this is it. This block busting proposal, can you hear now?
Yeah.
Okay. This block busting proposal for an 18-story building in the 2100 block of West Broadway in a maximum 3-story residential neighborhood is the trial balloon to busting all existing Vancouver neighborhoods with the excuse that in the end there will be affordable housing. There will not be affordable housing, as you've just heard from these wise people. We are in a struggle with the Premier of BC, the Mayor of Vancouver, and the Federal Liberals' current housing financial proposal. We can defeat ourselves in this struggle by feeling overwhelmed by their collective power. But remember, there are 3 of them, and there are thousands of us, and they are counting on us to give up without a real fight, whereas we are not going to. One of the most powerful checks on the power of elected officials is the day-to-day checks provided by organized, coordinated associations and communities, for which Kits is really famous. We need subsidized housing. We could create many new units swiftly by freeing owners of buildings and houses from red tape, unreasonable housing code requirements and fees. Subsidized housing should be built on land already owned by the various levels of government. Municipal fees and all taxes should be waived on builds for subsidized housing. To stop the pointless wrecking of existing neighborhoods and the enrichment of developers and foreign owners, we can organize to defeat David Eby. We're in an unusual position. He is currently backing the destruction of his own riding, and I'm backing the destruction of the currently elected person in our riding, namely David. Now, David's far from stupid, and the minute he finds out that there are a lot of people thinking about voting for someone else, he is going to rethink supporting our temporary current mayor, and he's going to release us from this idea of random zoning where anybody can dump anything anywhere because it doesn't matter damn what the city looks like at the end of it. So, we the federal government, just let them know that this is a hot topic in a Liberal riding, and we will see some movement there also. Now, what I would like to say finally is attending meetings like this, canvass your own neighborhood. That is your block. Go and put flyers in their doors, follow proceedings on the City Watch website, and most importantly, don't give up. Never, ever give up.
Okay, before this next gentleman asks his question or makes his point, two points to make. First off, we want to try to keep it to 2 to 3 minutes, and it can be a question or an opinion point or just a discussion about what we've talked about here. The second point is it's not free to put on these events. And so if you could give whatever you can afford, there is a box back at the bar on the way out the door. If you leave before everybody answers their questions and stuff, I just wanted to get that out there because we need donations to help fund these events. And this is the second in a series, and we will be building towards the future, and I'll comment on that in a second. Go ahead, you're up.
I'd just like to make one comment on Bill's talk and the other talks as well. So the type of housing that goes in, whether it's 4 stories, 6 stories, or 55,000 stories, the real thing is, if it's still subject to market forces, the prices will still go up, no matter what you do. It has to be public ownership, and it has to be available on free land. A typical example of that, which worked very well, however, it was just after World War II, was Vienna, which had a lot of space, so they took it all up, and for that reason, the state owns it, the prices are controlled, and you're not going to have popular housing, no matter if it's like Bill talked about, unless you could sort of face the market vote and have more public housing and public ownership. It's the way it goes. Market wins unless we do something about it, but on those basic facts. Thank you.
I have a question. I'm wondering, is there any successful case in the world to construct a 20-story high mega building in the middle of a low-rising residential area? Is there any case like that?
Do either of you know? Yours is on, I think, still.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Is there, I believe the question was, is there any successful instance of a 20-story building being put up in the middle of single-family housing neighborhood and being a positive contribution to the neighborhood, I believe. Is that correct, sir? Yeah? Okay. There you go.
Well, that's probably a relatively subjective question, or answer, I suppose, would be relatively subjective. That's a good question, though. I personally have, in my talk, I tried to highlight the differences between a high-rise type of concrete construction and lower-rise, and in each case, the lower-rise is more sustainable from an environmental point of view. It's cheaper, it's faster to build because it takes less time to build a building, so that means you have better use of your shortage of skilled labor. You can put out more units, almost double actually, with the same manpower. But you know, I mean, one of the things I find very frustrating is you get politicians at all 3 levels announcing all these things that, you know, David Eby's got taken away blanket zoning right across the whole city, and what he forgets is that there's no way to bring that back to an affordable housing. It actually is going to increase the cost of housing right across the whole city, because everybody's lot, that you own a lot in anywhere in the city right now that's within that provincial, or for that matter, the city of Vancouver,
done some pretty blanket things as well, blanket zonings, that your house, the value of your lot is determined by what you can build on it. There's a direct proportion. And when a developer, I've been a developer, I've built buildings. And what you do, you look for a lot, in a nice location, and you have a whole bunch of other factors you're considering, but you also have to figure out, what can I put on it? And what can I put on it will determine, and the market, what you can sell it for, will determine the value of the lot. It's a direct relationship. And again, people don't understand that.
Okay,
Politicians don't understand.
next up.
Yeah, so I think Mr. McCreery, you said you were talking about being able to accommodate growth in Vancouver of like 1% per year. The number I got with your plan of lower density development.
I think he looked at both 1 and 1.5%.
Yeah, but relatively low
Yeah.
numbers. And Dr. Lady said that, growth in Vancouver, in Metro Vancouver, there had been more housing development over the last, between 2001 and 2016. Then there was population growth. A little bit of disparity. I think right now Surrey is the largest growing municipality in Metro Vancouver, and is set to outsize Vancouver itself, as well as, there's a lot of growth in Burnaby, especially concentrated in those tall towers. But still, a lot of land in Burnaby is maintained at very low densities, single-family housing. There's very minimal photos of them being right next to each other still, as much of the development in Burnaby in past years was similar to the Broadway Plan that we have now, replacing lower density, older development. So you talk about density not supporting affordability, but how do you balance that with things like, I moved to Vancouver for a better job opportunity that paid more, which is the reason that I could come here, which is the reason I could afford housing when I moved here. And out-migration over the last year, a lot of people, like there's news that a lot of people in BC have been moving to Alberta, especially for lower housing costs. So with those differences of people moving out further from Vancouver itself, limited housing growth in Vancouver itself compared to surrounding municipalities, people moving out of the area when they're looking for more affordable housing, people moving into Vancouver because they have higher incomes that can support it. Doesn't that also contribute significantly to rising housing costs as the people who can afford the housing are moving here, and the people who can't are moving out? When density is constrained in Vancouver so much as it has been for a long time, it's really weird to say that increasing density doesn't introduce affordability when there's all those other confounding factors.
Okay, I'm not sure I got your whole question, but I think the issue that you're raising is the range of factors that lead to affordability and density is the whole story.
Yeah, you highlighted investment income, which
Yeah.
for sure is a factor. It's definitely if you're renting and funding someone else's mortgage on the property, and they're trying to make a profit both on their mortgage and the long-term paying, it's definitely going to raise the cost of housing.
Yeah.
But there's all of those other factors, the people who can afford more, especially in a constrained market with low rental vacancies, that the people who can afford are going to come in, the people who can't are going to leave. How much is that as a factor when rental vacancies are so low? When investors, a risk to them is high rental vacancies. If there were more capacity, wouldn't they have to stall raising prices at the very least? Whereas capital capacity and
I mean, what you say is perfectly true in theory. But unfortunately, we're in a situation of rule breaking here, that the demand is so high that the supply is simply not able to make a difference.
Yeah.
And if we produce more supply, we are inheriting a land value surface in the city, which, as the gentleman who made an earlier point remarked, the private market does not allow affordable housing to be built here. And so, again, picking up from what another fellow said, if you ask me, and I expect someone will ask me, well, so what would you do? I think that gradual forms of densification are appropriate, not the massive densification which we're facing in a totally at-large way here. And that the role of public land is absolutely critical. And public land, I think, has been developed in the city in a total silo that pays no attention to actually social needs in the city. And the Jericho proposal, which is on its way through City Council, is a good example of that. It's 70% condos. It's just like any other large private development. But the fact that that was public land should have made a very different scenario possible. One last thing to say is, when you're talking about the nature of demand, it's important to remember now that pretty much 100% of population growth in Canadian cities, certainly Vancouver and Toronto, is through immigration. And with immigration, you are getting a considerable number of people coming here who, at the very least, for the first 5 or 10 years here, are not going to be wealthy. And it is that population in particular that concerns me very much in terms of what housing they will find. And that is why I made a rather strong statement that I feel the current immigration scenario, or not scenario, the practice, the immigration targets of the federal government are simply reckless in terms of the impact of them. Anyway, I'm rambling around your question. I think you had several points you were making. I hope I've addressed some of them.
Somewhat. I think one of the other things is like you position public housing.
Thank you.
That's very valuable.
Thank you.
If I could add to what David said, I think that Vancouver's well on its way to becoming what I call a failed city. And that is, we've been talking about people moving out of the city. Young people, I know young people, I've been talking to them in the last couple of weeks, who are leaving because they would like to have a life instead of just paying somebody's mortgage. And or they don't see a future being able to own anything without help from their mom and dad. And not everybody has that opportunity. So, and you usually have to wait till they're not around anymore to have the assets that they've got, that they own. So, if we have a city where the people who actually are required to run the city can't afford to live in it, how can you have a functioning city?
Yeah.
So it becomes, in my opinion, a failed city.
Yeah. Okay. Mina, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Mina Wong, and I ran in 2014, Mayor of Vancouver. I was wondering about the vacant property tax. Even though I'm not elected, but the policy got adopted by the city and also the province. Apparently Toronto has also adopted the policy as well. Okay, I want to say one thing is, I read a comment about this event that is the first meeting was so white and also white hair. I was at that meeting, obviously, I was invisible. And I know that there's other visible minorities here. And I just want to let everybody know that this is very inclusive. community engagement events. And I would love to see more people coming and take part, because of democratic process, this is what we are, and we need to keep that, and then we need to keep our city hall accountable to us. And we have to bank our pots or whatever, make them wake up and then listen to us. And now they seem to, I don't know. What happened? And that's one area I'm so happy to see all the people that came out of different color, different creed. And I do have a question to ask though. Like, what do you see the city's or government's role in providing affordable housing in the city? In Hong Kong, where I came from, almost 50% of housing are public government built. Either you can purchase affordable, you can purchase, or you can rent. Or in Singapore even, over 80, I think it's 90% are owned by people, local residents, and they can pass it to their children even. And they're affordable for local residents. And in Canada, in Vancouver, our real estate now has become an investment for international market. It's no longer like, where is the government's role in stopping that kind of And then our land, our housing is for our people. People who work here, who grew up here, who live here, and who take ownership of our community, not some fly-by-night investors with money. And I'm an immigrant myself, and I don't want to see that happening in my neighborhood. And I'm a renter myself. I don't know how many renters here. It's not just owners and NIMBYs here. Like renters are going to be rented out. Like the affordable housing unit is going to be replaced with all this new developments. I see all the 3-story affordable rental buildings all have a sign now outside with new developments waiting for approval, 20, 30-story units. And you mentioned about the affordability. Not anymore when they're developed into new rental units. So I want to see what in your opinion, experience of what the government's role can be, because I've been told the government should have a hand in the real estate development, in providing affordable housing, which I totally don't agree.
Well, thank you. You touched on a lot of issues. The basic question you ask is what is and should be the role of government. Obviously, we are privileged to have 3 levels of government in Canada, and they all have different, not just responsibilities, but also capacities. And one of the great problems is that the capacity at the municipal level is the least. And here we're quite different from the US, where big cities have got a lot more capacity to have social services and housing programs and so on. I don't think it's a secret that the federal government has essentially dropped the ball when it comes to housing. 1994 budget ended the social housing program in Canada, which had actually been a very good and successful program. And it was done understandably. I'm not saying I agree with it, but a case could be made that at that time the national deficit and debt were a huge problem. Something had to be done. The government decided this is what they would do. But the problem was that when the deficit and debt once again became manageable, they did not then return to a housing program. And until around 2018, when the National Housing Strategy was announced, I think initially, really nothing happened. So that huge period, and that period, of course, was really formative for creating the problems that we have here now. And the absence of government. Provincially, oh dear, this is getting very much a party political broadcast. Well, you know what happened from 2001 to 2016, I don't have to tell you. There was a government that really didn't feel that housing was a problem. Indeed, it thought that things were going very well in terms of housing if prices went up because their property owners were getting rewarded for their investment in the provincial economy. So, yes, of course, governments are important, but we just have a very sad vacuum in terms of relevant policy over a period of 25 years, which was actually a very critical and formative period in creating the problem that we now have. And the hole is now so deep, it's very difficult to see how it can be filled. And that government can certainly play a role and will play a role and is trying to play a role. I mean, if one wants to be optimistic, you could say that perhaps the best thing is that now all three levels of government feel there is a severe housing crisis. Well, that's a plus. They want to do something. Whereas a decade ago, they didn't. But what they can do now is very challenging. And my own view, as is apparent from what I said, is that I think the municipal government is going in exactly the wrong direction. That affordability needs the preservation of older properties. The more new properties you build, the less affordable the market will become.
Mark.
In your analysis, which I thought was very enlightening, we're basically the housing prices in a number of major cities are a victim of international finance. And while it's true that the governments could build subsidized housing, as long as we are a market for international investment, house prices will generally be driven up. Is there any jurisdiction in your knowledge where they got this investor problem under control? Do we have any precedent for that?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because there is. And it's been mentioned by an earlier speaker, and it's Singapore. Singapore is a poster child for a free market economy. It's wide open, and yet you look at its housing market and it is very closed and dominated by the state. And in terms of, is there any way in which they can control international financial flows, they tax it to the hilt. So investors, and I need to make the point here, this is not only international property investors, but also Singaporean property investors are taxed on their second, third, fourth, etc. property. And how are they taxed? Well, last year, because the government in Singapore felt that things were getting out of control, they moved the tax on buying property for international buyers from 30% to 60%. 60%. And they, for Singaporeans, for their second property, it went up, as I recall, to 25 or 30%. So heavy taxes are placed on investors. And I think that they have recognized that it is the investor that is driving up prices. And that is something they control. And what is more remarkable is that it's one of the freest economies in the world that has reached that decision.
If I can ask a question on that one, do they roll over that tax income into purchasing power for further public housing?
Yeah.
Everything is connected to everything else in Singapore, and the government is right at the center of it. The other side of the story is, as again the earlier speaker mentioned, 80 to 90% of housing is government housing, which is leased to Singaporeans. So it is subsidized. So they are heavily involved both in the supply and the demand side.
Another aspect of what you were talking about, I think, is the attitude of all three levels of government. The city of Vancouver is a little bit more confusing, but effectively, the province and the feds, and to a large extent the city, have what they call various forms of real estate development groups of civil servants. And in the 70s, when I was involved in politics as an elected park commissioner, with team, we caucused to that. I was actually involved in some of the decisions with the council were involved in. And if you, oh boy, lost my train of thought. But it's so effectively we used land, public land, for public benefit. And the mentality now in government is they have to, like a private landowner, maximize the return on the investment. And that is suicidal, in my opinion, with respect to having any kind of a balanced, livable city. You're not going to create a livable city if you're taking public land and just putting as much housing in most cases on it as you can possibly get. And that's what's happening in Jericho. That's what's happening in Seneca and other. I mean, we haven't even seen the bus barge yet, or maybe we have, I don't know, but I can't wait to see that. It's going to be, it's the wrong priority, wrong values, and we need to adjust those.
Yeah, we've got, I mean, we're at 8:02 right now, so.
Sorry, I just want to make a pitch for citizen involvement. This walk was a product of enormous citizen consultation involvement. It meets most of your criteria, Bill, of a livable environment. We can do it if the citizens get involved.
So we'll finish off with these two questions, and then we got to skedaddle because we're supposed to be out of here by 8:30, cleared out and everything. So, go.
Hi, thank you so much for giving us very good reasons that the three levels of government are planning things for our community that don't make sense. And what worries me is that there's already hoarding up on a number of city streets in Kitsilano that are single-family units where there's hoarding up with the billboards announcing new development. Now, I see a lot of concerned citizens here, and this lady here on my left gave a terrific fire and brimstone, and we're all very keen.
Yep.
But where do we go from here? I don't see anybody here from any level of government. How do we actually change this? You know, it seems like we're all talking to the computer. So what do we do?
Well, that's.
We need to write letters. Every legal action should be writing a letter to David Eby, the mayor, city council. If they heard even from 50 people over the next week or two, letters in saying, this is a problem, we have a problem, you have to change. It would make a difference, and get your neighbors to do the same. They need to hear from us. That's the right letters.
Also showing up at a city hall at the meeting, city hall meeting, organize everybody, be there at the meeting, and also call the media.
Who's going to do that? Who's going to organize us? Is that
You're on it. We used to call them phone trees, but now we've got internet, for God's sakes. We can get over 10,000 people in 1 minute and just go over to the city hall and tell that
The short answer to your question is that there's a number of things we can do. Amongst them, as Jan suggested, write letters. As somebody else here said, march on City Hall. Yes. What we need to do, I think, as a group is, put out some options for what we can do, discuss those, and make decisions about what to do next. And that is part of the process that we're involved in right here, right now. That's what KitsPlan is about. It's not an instantaneous solution to the tsunami that's coming our way, but it is building towards solutions. And we have to be a credible organization in order for anybody at City Hall to pay attention to us. And that credibility is built through events like this where we get informed ourselves and then start moving towards making decisions on planning the neighborhood itself. And within that context, you can also have actions where you have rallies at City Hall around different issues and things like that. And hopefully there'll be somebody listening. We have tried to get somebody at the last meeting from the city to present the Broadway Plan from the city's perspective. They said they don't do it. We have tried to get developers to come out and speak about their projects, some of these 20-story towers. Of course they won't do it. They're afraid to come out. And yet they continue to talk about residents being impediments to progress in the city, and we're the last ones that are any kind of impediment, actually. And they've done away with public hearings, so we don't have any place to voice our opinions. So what we have left is events like this, where we come out, we voice our opinions, but also we start formulating things like marches on City Hall, like letter writing campaigns and stuff. That's what we can do, all those little things. Hopefully we get some people in planning and or some people in council to start to listen.
Before I go, could you please, we've all given our emails, I hope, at the front.
Yes. Yeah.
Could you send out the addresses of who we should be writing these letters to?
Yes.
Okay, that would be helpful, at least as a first start.
Yeah, okay. All right, last question.
Okay, this question is for Professor Lay. So from what I understand tonight, it's the increased land values that are the real culprit because income has not kept pace. There will always be people who require affordable housing. And I don't know if you read the book Red Hot City by Emmergluck. It's 2022. Atlanta had the idea similar to Broadway Plan, where they would use their belt line, which was an unused railroad track, to connect neighborhoods. It was a idealistic view. They thought it would work. However, what happened, and my question is, will the same happen here? Because what happened is before shovels even hit the ground, you have to have enough affordable housing bought up because of land use values. So what happened there is that predominantly black neighborhoods were marginalized and forced out, and then land use values just rose. So it wasn't a realistic plan. It didn't do what they wanted it to do. The belt line didn't connect neighborhoods. It just got the rich richer. So with the Broadway Plan, it snapped to grid. A Broadway Plan snapped into Vancouver Plan. Then you wash your hands, not you, but people, developers, they just wash their hands and walk away. So what can we do? Like it was the empty homes tax. That was when Ken Sims gave that money back to the developers. In council, in the news, they said that was a reverse Robin Hood effect. That was the piggy bank to help build affordable housing. That was the money, right? So we need some optimism. What is it going to be like Atlanta, or what could we do?
And that's and that's not going to be solved overnight. We took, like, as you said, 35, 40 years to get to this mess. It'll probably take another 25 to get out. But we need people with smarts to build the right houses. They say, build BC, we're going to build the right houses. Well, we need action. We need the right houses. There will always be, David Harvey says, that it's a broken system. So we need to realize it's a broken system. There's increased land use values, but we need the right housing.
I think that's just a fundamental point you've left with all of us, and I think what we're hearing increasingly today is more housing. We need more housing. Supply. What we need is more affordable housing. We do not need the 70% condos that are going to be put into the Jericho project. That's not a need here. The need is for affordable housing. So whenever you hear government or indeed planners speaking about just getting more housing, more units, that is not solving the problem. It's not solving the problem, because as I showed in some examples earlier, I mean, look at Richmond, 50% more supply than population growth, and prices keep going up. It's got to be affordable, and that is where public land is so strategic, and I agree totally. That resource up to now has not been properly used.
There has also been a suggestion by some people, including Patrick Condon, that one possible tool in the toolbox that the city can certainly insist on is again instead of 20% social housing, whoever knows what that is, in each development project, an insistence on a minimum of 50%. Instead, because that will start having an effect on the market itself.
But isn't that just a reduction from the outrageous rentals that are market rentals?
It is, but it's a huge.
It's nonsense. Nobody can afford the big one, but
Well,
20% less of impossibility doesn't come within range of possibility.
True. Yeah. So. We've got to wrap it because it's 8:15.
I just wanted to make a comment about affordable housing. That housing is tied to industry and to the economy.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that BC could do would be to diversify the economy out to the outlying areas. Yeah. And then there's lots of affordable housing in Smithers and Cranbrook and Port St. John. I think that's where the population should go. There's going to be a time when Vancouver will be full. And I think you said a failed city. We're heading in that direction for sure.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to move the economy away from Vancouver to a large extent so that the population can follow it. Like Europe builds centers, industrial centers, and I don't think they have a problem.
Yeah. Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. I hope you got something out of it. And I wanted to thank David Lay and Bill McCreery for their contribution.